Hi everyone, welcome today to the webinar about ransomware and healthcare. My name is Christiaan Beek. I'm in the office of the CTO, Intel Security, and today joins me from DynTek, one of our voted partners, Steve Struthers, Vice President of Security of DynTek Services. So let's start with. The topic ransomware, of course, is very, very popular, and today I want to start with some of the statistics we have from our division in McAfee Labs, and where we say like what is the kind of Q1 statistics we have seen over this year already. So if you look at some of the left picture where we see like, hey, how many samples have we been submitted to us or have we processed, you can see it started like in January with a little dip in February, but then in March it really spiked up. We were actually measuring, I think, the most samples we ever had processed submitted around ransomware ever in Q1 of 2016, like almost 675,000 samples in just one quarter. So that's massive, and it also actually emphasizes how big this threat actually is getting. And where it started over the last 3-4 years, I would say Q1 2016 came up with a big bang and really started to ramp up with all these threats going on and forth. If you look on the right side of my slide, you would see that most of the most prevalent families we are seeing. So CryptoWall, Tesla Crypt is a big one. Some of the minor ones, but also if you look from a perspective of the healthcare sector, we saw Samos or SamSam or some other names that the actors were giving to this ransomware. A ransomware family that was actually targeting the healthcare sector in particular, and some more on that later. But although it seems to be like a small number, the impact was really high, and we had many victims around the world, mostly focused in the US, some in Europe, some in Asia, but again, we had many victims in the US targeting by this piece of ransomware. So if you look like the general picture of which countries were hit by ransomware, of course US, but also Russia actually was very a big target. Europe, India, we see Brazil, we see Argentina there, Australia, of course, South Africa. And if you notice here, honestly, it sounds a bit strange, but most of the time they target countries where people can afford to pay the ransom. So if you look at those countries, they're well connected to the internet. There's a big industry going on, and many people actually are victim of these ransomware families. And if we focus on, for example, on South America, Brazil, what unique is about this Brazil is that many ransomware families which are popping up in Brazil are actually developed in Brazil. So there's a lot of cyber crimes, organized crime activity in that country already. Mostly focusing on banking trojans in the past, but you see like they're switching to models where they really look into, hey, we see that ransomware is very profitable. Let's customize some of the code we already have. Let's develop some more ransomware and actually targeting their own people in their country. So you won't see a lot of that kind of ransomware targeting other parts of the world, but they keep it like in the country. So a very interesting thought. If you look at those countries, if you're chatting with some of the authors of ransomware, they call it the Tier 1 countries. So countries that are known for paying the ransom, that's why they target it mostly. So that's why I also would see like the language support sometimes, although it's sometimes even very poor, how they support the language in the ransomware, but they call it the Tier 1 countries. So I would say like Australia, Europe, South America, and US, Canada are the top 1 countries which are hit by ransomware at the moment. So if you put it in a small timeline, history-wise, before 2009, there were some proof of concepts around ransomware. So some universities here in the US, they were talking about like the asymmetric encryption, which means the concept of public and private key, where I have the public key and the private keys with the ransomware guys, and I encrypt your files with both, and only if I give you the private key, you can decrypt your files. That kind of concept was developed early in 2000, 2001, and presented at some congresses here and seminars here in the US. After that, some minor ransomware kind of concepts were tested but not actually active in the field. That changed with the invention of Bitcoin in 2009. It took a few years, as mostly what we see with some of the inventions that then adapted in cyber crime. But in 2013, the most popular one was, of course, CryptoLocker. And CryptoLocker was actually the first big ransomware family adapting Bitcoin. So actually people could pay anonymously the ransom, but also the actors who stayed anonymous because, well, the way the Bitcoins are working, it keeps your identity pretty safe for now. If I talk about ransomware, I mostly speak about what I call crypto ransomware. There's a difference between like screen locker ransomware, the kind of ransomware, it locks your screen, it says you have some wrong pictures on your desktop, they will call the FBI or NSA or the local law enforcement, and if you don't pay, they will send the pictures and your phone number or your IP address over, and people pay. That was very popular in 2013, like Rabbit-On. We still see some of those samples popping up, but most of the samples on ransomware we're seeing now is so-called crypto ransomware. And I just put a few names out there for 2016, but the list goes on and on. Where we, like I stated over here, like where we started with around like 10, 12 families in January of 2016. I think currently we're tracking more than 100, and I think we are already hitting like the 110 different ransomware families, crypto ransomware families at the moment. And last week was like a crazy week where we saw like 3-4 different new families popping up because it's getting more and more easier for people to develop ransomware. So what we do in our Advanced Threat Research Center is like, okay, with all that data, we try to visualize it, how fast it pops up. And we made a little movie for this webinar where we say like from March this year, we grabbed a few of those top families and we say like, one slide back. And where we say like, okay, let's visualize how fast on a daily basis different ransomware families are doing command and control servers, have payment size up. So what you see here is actually the Locky family in the blue. The red is some CryptoWall, PayCrypt command and control servers. The green colors are payment sites that are popping up. So we're just in the month March, and you see already like how fast on a daily basis these kind of things are growing. So sites go on and off, especially with Locky. We saw like maybe 15, 20 sites per day hosting the ransomware. We call them distribution sites popping up. The next day, half of them are inactive. Why? Because of course the industry picks them up. They start blocking those sites. But these guys were so fast deploying their infrastructure that it grows really, really fast, and they're prepared. They have the kind of models where they already are days ahead for planning this kind of stuff. Going back and forth. So this is like a little funny eye candy we presented to demonstrate how fast this threat is actually growing. So let's go to my next slide. Oh, it's popping over again. So if you look at the observations for ransomware in the first quarter, what we definitely saw is that the ransomware as a service has increased massively. Ransomware as a service, and I will later show you some screenshots, is actually where you go to the underground, which is called the Tor, the darknets, where people offering this service, you can buy yourself in very easily for a few Bitcoins or a percentage of the profit. And with a few mouse clicks, you can actually set up a complete ransomware campaign very easily. Another thing we saw is that the source code of ransomware is becoming publicly available. So some researchers released some proof of concept, thought, hey, it would be interesting to release this proof of concept, but actually they fueled the growth and the increase of ransomware because people were grabbing that code, improve it, use it, change it, and created another ransomware families of it. And what I discussed earlier in my talk is the targeted ransomware campaign on the healthcare industry, the SAMSA campaign where we saw like another one. It's called Petya, the ransomware that is encrypting the master boot record. It was the first one we saw encrypting a complete master boot record. So when you boot up your system, you first have to pay the ransom before booting into the system, it's getting useless. Apple users, it's something we forecasted already last year. Of course, the Windows operating system is mainstream, so most of the ransomware we see, I would say 99%, is focused on the Windows platform. But slowly we already see samples of ransomware that's hitting Linux systems. But Apple users got hit in January as well. Thankfully, the Key Ranger ransomware was discovered quickly, and Apple took action to block the application responsible for it in their App Store, and the threat was over. But you see, the people are really trying to find new ways for spreading ransomware, even different platforms. And another trend we were seeing was like ransomware going after web content management systems. So what they did, they went after some WordPress or Joomla sites. They found some vulnerabilities because many people host their sites, but they don't update their plugins, and many of the web content management systems plugins, they're vulnerable. It's written by an author that's nice for including your Twitter account, or maybe set up some social media links. When you blog, people can share it easily on social media, but they develop it once or twice, and there are vulnerabilities in it, and these criminals are looking for those vulnerabilities. And once they do that, they took over the web pages, they encrypted them, and they said, like, you know what, if you want your website back and you don't have a backup, you have to pay, and you get your content of your website back. So it's a new trend. We saw some indicators last year, but yeah, in January the CTB locker was actually approaching this new vector of attack. So the question rises, of course, why is ransomware so successful? Well, first of all, it started actually with organized crime. And the organized crime gangs, like I talked earlier before on the CryptoLocker campaign, these guys started CryptoLocker like in 2013. And then in 2015, there was a major operation in which we participated as well as a company called Operation Tovar. And in Operation Tovar, we took down the whole Zeus botnet infrastructure that was also used for spreading CryptoLocker. So these guys went silent for probably a month or so when their infrastructure was taken down. And suddenly, after CryptoLocker, we saw CryptoWall popping up as a new family. At that time, it was called Crypto Defense. But we really suspect, and actually we have a lot of indicators, that the people behind CryptoLocker actually continued with the CryptoWall campaign. And by developing these kind of campaigns, they started to make a model, the affiliate program, which comes out of the spyware world, the clickjacking world, where you can buy yourself in, and you say, like, you know what, 70% of the revenue goes to you if you buy in yourself, sometimes for a few $1,000s. And then 70% of the revenue from the ransom goes to you, and 30% goes to the actual people behind the infrastructure. Why this model with lucrative profits? Well, as an affiliate, you're the guy with the most risk. You're actually buying the ransomware from them. You have access to a kind of portal where you can actually monitor your campaign, but you're the one actually responsible for distributing the ransomware. So you have to rent botnets, or you have to find ways to spread your ransomware, and that's high risk, because if you make a mistake, you can be easily found. And on the contrary, the guys behind the infrastructure of the ransomware servers and affiliate servers, they have the less risk. They have like the infrastructure set up somewhere in countries where law enforcement is not very cooperative on requests for takedown operations or investigations, or they know that, hey, I can bypass the law very easily over here. So they set up their infrastructure very well, and the moment something is taken down, they have like another virtual server somewhere, and they just boot it up within the next 15 minutes, and they're back in business. So they have several layers of protection to protect themselves from being detected. So they're pretty safe, and in the meantime, they get like 20 to 30% of the profits. So another thing why it's successful is, like mentioned in the Q1 overview, is like we see open source code is available. If you would search certain sites for this, you can find easily proof of concept codes of ransomware. And there are a lot of people that actually say, like, you know what, let's try it. If I can't find a job in IT in some countries, it might be better for me to go to the dark side and start earning some bucks with ransomware, because I see these big guys are making millions. So for me, I don't have to make millions, but if I can make a few thousand or maybe 100,000 with a campaign, that would be a nice amount of money for a living, right? Another thing we see, of course, the ransomware as a services ones, but also kits. There are easily kits available for a few Bitcoins. You can buy them, and you can actually start creating your own ransomware within like minutes. Actually, we were investigating a kit recently, I think a few weeks ago. I would say everybody can do it. A few mouse clicks. You just have to make a Bitcoin wallet, and you just click it, insert it into that. You give it the custom extension you want to do, and you create a ransomware sample. So, for example, if you look at the open source code example, what we do a lot here in the advanced threat research team is when we research threats, and also ransomware, of course, is one of our top priorities. We also look at code comparison. So, for example, what we did is like, okay, we grabbed the hidden tier ransomware, which was a proof of concept code released by a Turkish researcher, and we took the code, put it in our systems, and then we start investigating other ransomware samples. So the red dots are all the spin-offs we saw within, like, I think the guy released it in like November, December in 2015, and you see already since, I think now it's March, April, like 6, 7 other families completely based on this code improved. But still, based on the code segments from the original code, we could actually say like, hey, definitely these families are related and a spin-off of this open source code. So yeah, it's nice to investigate the concept of ransomware, but put it on like sites like GitHub or some other sites where people can grab it and start developing code. Could be pretty dangerous as well. So the big question I always get when I'm presenting these kind of decks to law enforcement or other audiences is like, so who is behind ransomware? And honestly, the easiest way for me to categorize this is like, yeah, the three ones, like a wannabe, the affiliate, and the organized crime, I would say. So let's go into those ones. So a wannabe, for example, it's somebody who picks up this whole story and thinks like, hey, that would be interesting. I can make a few bucks out of this, and let's try to do this. It's the same we see in the DDoS scene, where some script kiddies are actually trying to sell DDoS services, take down complete company websites or infrastructure, and honestly, they don't know what they're doing. Over here as well, this guy tried to set up ransomware as a service. As you can see, this one he used the Onion network, the Tor network, to set up this service. And so easily what you can see over on the screen is like the fee is 5%. So he's asking 5% of your ransom. You fill in the Bitcoin address, you fill in some of the money you're asking for. I think at some screen he was actually saying like, hey, don't be too greedy, because I want people to pay. And he was setting up this kind of service. The funny thing was that based in the code in the page and some other indicators we had, he was easily to be tracked down. So we actually found who was behind this. We escalated with our partners in law enforcement, and I think he has now another home at the moment where he's living. And ransomware as a service, it works like an operator. There are people that do the completely back-end, the botnet affiliate service provider, and there are people that do cache management. So they handle the cash flow from Bitcoin. So the moment the first wallet where people donate the money, they will grab it there. They monitor it on a daily basis, continuously, and they will actually put transaction after transaction, obfuscate it, and try to hide the Bitcoin transactions. At some point, you will end up in a kind of master wallet where they can cash the money. Another wannabe, this one was pretty funny actually as well. You put in your Bitcoin address, you join, you put in your stats, you can actually download the client, and if you can see on this screen, download client.scr. If you did that, you ended up with like a 27 meg screensaver file, and actually you start wondering, well, who would allow on his email server nowadays screensaver files that at least are 27 meg big? So something easily to detect, but it shows that people are really trying to make money out of this. And in this case, in the top of the screen, the payout ratio is 75%. So for you as affiliate, 75% and 25% for the guy behind this. This was another funny one. This is like an example of a ransomware kit where I just created like a webinar ransomware, and I put in a password for decryption, which is normally not very normal to do. So I put in the password, decrypt me please, and this one is in French, as you can see. So when you click creation ransomware and you start investigating it, the sample, at the bottom you see a screenshot of one of my editors, and at the bottom of the ransomware in clear text was actually the password. So in case you were encrypted by something like this, it was easy to decode the files. Well, discussed a little bit earlier as well, but if we deal with organized crime, and the guys are really behind CryptoWall and some of the other big family names, those one are our experienced people. Those are really involved in multiple campaigns. They have really fast response times. They have like a server image for fast deployment. So the moment one of their servers goes down or is taken down by law enforcement, within like 20-30 minutes, they have another server up, rerouting the traffic, and they're very cautious, so you really have to have a kind of reputation in the underground before they let you interact with them. But also, they're tracking their news, the forums around their product. They're adjusting as well. A big example is like we did last year with the Cyber Threat Alliance partners, a big investigation in CryptoWall 3. The moment we released our report on Wednesday, if I remember correctly, on Thursday there was a new sample of CryptoWall version 4, because the stuff we mentioned in our report, they adapted, they learned from it. It's like, oh, they're on top of us. So the developers start working on it, and the next day we had a new release of the ransomware. So that was very interesting to see, but also you could see like it's big business for these guys, and they're willing to invest. And honestly, if you make, I think we monitored around $321 million in 6 months, you can afford to hire some people that maintain your product. So if you look at healthcare, and honestly, this is some of the stats from Q1, what we do in our ATR group. We're looking at different sectors, what are the threats, what are the incidents we're monitoring over the month in different sectors. And I would say for Q1 this year, the healthcare sector, yeah, the most biggest threat was actually the malware, of course, the ransomware. And we saw account hijacking as number 2, and some DDoS attacks being reported by some healthcare customers as well. But malware, ransomware was really the top threat for Q1 in the healthcare sector. Of course, the famous one, the Hollywood hospital. We saw some CT scan systems being impacted, patient files were encrypted, and many, many more. And the hospital put in the news that they paid like 70K of ransom. We know some other victims that paid even more with this particular part of ransomware campaign. So definitely many of the healthcare victims were impacted by this one. A little list here. So we see like, and these are all public names, and the ones where you see like a hospital are some cases we worked on, and we don't want to disclose the name as a respect for the privacy and the non-disclosure we have with those customers. But as you can see, US, Germany, multiple hospitals, Australia, UK. So this is definitely becoming a global problem as well, and a new trend which is worrisome for us as well. Why on earth would you target hospitals with ransomware? It's to me personally, opinion, an ethical thing to do. But these guys don't mind. As long as they get money, they're fine with that. Now, if you talk about this SAMSA case, for example, which we worked on closely with the FBI, we investigated at some point the final transactions of how many money did these guys make already with this campaign, and we ended up with like 5-6 wallets, which we call master wallets. So we investigate the financial streams, the transactions of bitcoins, and sometimes you end up like after 10,000 layers of transactions, you will find what we call the master wallets. And in this case, it was less transactions, but we found some interesting wallets where we really believe these guys were ending up their money. And you saw like $100,000 was already made so far on this campaign alone. In the bottom of my slide, there's a link. If you go to our blogs, blogmcafee.com, and you search for targeted ransomware, no longer threat, you will find the blog posting, but also a very detailed analysis of this ransomware campaign and how the ransomware was working. So if you're interested in some technical read, I would really highly suggest to go there. So the big question is like, well, what is Intel Security doing about it? Well, actually, we do a lot. Some of the stuff, honestly, we can't even mention because we don't want to overplay our hands with some of the operations we are working on. But as you can see here, our CTO, Steve Gropeman, was a couple of times in the news discussing to the public around ransomware, what's going on. We've joined as one of the founders the Cyber Threat Alliance, where we share ransomware indicators with our partners. So it's Symantec, Fortinet, Palo Alto, and us. The big four, we're sharing a lot of indicators around ransomware hashes, distribution sites, so that all our mutual customers are protected as soon as possible. So the moment we detect a new site, it goes automatically in our threat sharing platform, and at that time, globally, all those companies inform their customers and update their statistics, so we are protected. On the other hand, we work a lot with the European Cybercrime Center. We have an advisor in there. I work a lot with these people as well, where we participate in takedown operations and investigations around people behind these kind of campaigns. So yeah, internally for the last 2 years, I'm leading a focus group on ransomware, where we really track down these campaigns, where we really investigate who's behind this, how can we better protect this. How we participate in investigation, and also we're innovating some new technology, which we will soon announce and release. But the challenge we have, and let's be honest about this, is like ransomware is hard to detect from this perspective, is that you can only detect ransomware the moment it starts executing. Because honestly, if you look at the file from the outside, it could be any innocent file, just like normal malware. But and of course, normal malware sounds ridiculous, but if you grab a piece of malware, sometimes when you just do some static analysis on it, you can already see like, hey, there are some suspicious lines of code in here, which might indicate like, this is a suspicious file, so let it better be safe than sorry, and let's block this file already. With ransomware, it's a bit more complicated because sometimes, most of the time actually, ransomware is using kind of functions that are already embedded in the operating system. So you can't block those functions because they're part of your Windows operating system. They are used, so it doesn't look very suspicious. So only the moment you start executing and it starts to encrypt files, that's actually where you discover like, hey, it's ransomware, and are you in time to save the files or not? So those are really challenges you have with ransomware. And also I think many vendors are having a challenge like, okay, how can we block ransomware before being executed? So it's the challenges we worked on, and I think yeah, as I mentioned, soon we will release some of our new innovative technology based on our research for over the last, I would say, almost 2 years on this topic. So stay tuned. So what can we expect next? Well, unfortunately, some of the predictions we did in 2015 were already coming true around ransomware, where they were targeting specific systems, and in this case, the healthcare sector. But also, what if they start targeting some other devices? Hey, ransomware in a car, for example, with all the electronics and computers, or some of the embedded devices we see in the critical infrastructure. Why would we maybe encrypt maybe some of the control tower of an airport, the systems with ransomware? It sounds scary, and I don't want to draw this picture here of fear, but honestly, with these guys being ruthless, you could expect anything. And I think as an industry, we and especially as Intel Security, we really try to awake the industry and say, like, you know, guys, we really have to think about security, especially with IoT and all this new technology coming up. Definitely security must be a top priority in your development life cycle on this. So maybe I've drawn maybe a picture which you think like, is there any hope? Well, I think there is hope. I put like a little slide here where I say like, these are some ransomware families that recently got cracked, and people are working on it. I would say different security researchers from all vendors around the world are trying to do their best and hunting this down and providing and cracking ransomware. Because the guys behind it also make mistakes. The Petya boot disk encryption, it was easily being circumvented. TeslaCrypt just announced recently their master key that they will stop their operations. Why? People are guessing, but I think the law enforcement was really getting close on them, and they choose to be better safe than sorry and release the master key so all the victims can decrypt their files. And some of the other examples are here from some other ransomware that recently got cracked and being decrypted. So with that being said, I want to turn over the floor to Steve Struthers from DynTek. Steve is DynTek's Vice President of Security Solutions. He's a 20+ years industry veteran, and he's specialized in creating security and risk management solutions for healthcare, government, education, and some other commercial clients across the country. In addition, I would like to say DynTek was recently actually recognized as Intel's Security Partner of the Year, and it's a strong partner in helping organizations combat threats like this one, and we are discussing today. So I thank you for now. If there's any questions, please send them over. We will answer them at the end of our webinar. And for now, Steve, the floor is yours.
That's great. Thanks, Christian. Hi, everyone. Great presentation. Really good to get some background and I think see what is really going on behind the scenes with all these attackers that we have out there. So I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes today and talk a little bit about some practical ideas. It's certainly not the comprehensive set of all the things that you guys can do, but it's just some things that you may have already thought of or that you may not have thought of. In addition, to talk a little bit about maybe more of a little strategic way that you can think about things that will certainly not just cover the issues that you are running into potentially from a ransomware perspective, but also across the board on your security perspective. So thinking about what might you be able to use right now today in the infrastructure that you have? And I'm going to use an Intel security background as an example, so from an EPO or endpoint perspective, from leveraging the tools that you already have. But one of the things that we've got to think about is that the crypto-based ransomware really just keeps reinventing itself. So as soon as a variant is out there, they're already thinking about another variant because they know that within 30 days there's going to be a signature, there's going to be a way to find this, and they're going to be stopped. So protecting today is great, but there's going to be a change and it's going to be harder to catch that. And it's interesting because these are really some, as Christian sort of identified to us, there's some professional organizations out there that really work the same way as your dev teams do. When you're developing tools for the good of your organization, they're looking at the security vendors that are out there, and they're testing their new variants against these products. So they've got these products installed in labs. They're testing them. They're getting them they're figuring out how to get around the gaps. And this is really a very organized way of going after things. And then the other things you'll find, we talked about, again, a little bit earlier, is that while some of those variants become less active, another one sort of comes out and gains ground quickly after that. So being diligent and having vigilance is really important because you're just going to keep seeing things come out. And some of the things with the existing infrastructure that I'd like to really talk about is the idea of knowing that they're going to do this, knowing that they've got those tools already in place and they've got the same tools that you do. It's valuable if you can build some sort of customized things internally that they're not necessarily going to know that you have. So by identifying the patterns and the sort of behavioral things that these ransomware delivery systems use, it's possible for you to take the tools that you have, things like in a McAfee Intel perspective, Virus Scan Enterprise, the endpoint security tools, even HIPS, and to start to apply some customization to those internally to help you fight back. So one of the things that we want to basically help you guys do is to understand that there's some rules and some things that you'll be able to put in place to basically prevent installation, to basically take a look at the payloads, to take a look at the evolving threats, and to sort of run them whether within application control or within HIPS in your current environment to block some of these attacks. And I put a link up here, but I'm not going to ask you guys to write it down now because we'll send you a follow-up at the end. But from a technical perspective, if you guys go through, you'll be able to see some very specific, we don't have time on this call, step-by-step cases that you can make in order to start to block some of this activity. And it's also important that you test this because, again, it's not out of the box. It's customizations to the rule sets. So one of the things that I like to think about, too, is if you do things up front and you prepare, you're generally not going to run into as many problems. But what happens when you are hit by ransomware? What are some of the things maybe that you could have done to prevent them? Planning is always great. So it's really important to do some really simple things. Have the support numbers ready for your vendors. I know most of you probably have that. Original install disks on your endpoints, original images, just sort of having things ready to go in the event that you do need to rebuild. Because I know that in our experience, a lot of time is wasted once people realize that we've got to do a reset, we've got to hit the reset key now. Well, now we go into another wait period while people sort of get together all the things that they need to rebuild. The next thing that I think is high priority for me is backups. And I know it's typical, it's hygiene, it's something you should be doing all the time. But without backups, without basically doing this very diligently, if you're hit by ransomware, you are going to lose data. And I can tell you that we have a number of customers that we work with on a regular basis. They've got backups. They probably, when they really look at it after they get hit with an attack, they realize that it wasn't broad enough and that they were missing things that they really needed in those backups. And that includes, testing that process to make sure you can also do restores. The other thing that we hear a lot lately, and I just seem to hear this everywhere that I go, is that, antivirus is becoming obsolete and we don't need antivirus software. But it's really not a correct statement. I mean, the argument makes sense when you take a look at the amount of hit rates that are coming through advanced attacks versus typical signature-based attacks. But the truth still is that older signatures do get discovered, they do still come, and they do still need to be blocked. So, it's very important to still keep AV and firewall packages up to date and then to supplement them with some type of an advanced tool that will do more of a heuristics-based look at things on a day-to-day basis. And this is an important stat that I think makes a lot of sense, that 30% of malware still gets detected by AV in the first 3 days, and 90% gets detected after 30 days. So even though with 30%, it's not a high hit rate, it's still 30% that you're going to get in those first 3 days. And then having virus in place and having it updated after 30 days, if you're not one of the first people hit with that variant, there's a good chance that it's going to get stopped by your signature-based solution. Regular software updates, again, it's surprising to me how many people are not on the latest patch levels. We find systems that are patched 6 months, a year or more back, and the truth is that all of those systems are real easy targets, and it's probably one of the number one ways that we see our clients get victimized by ransomware. Map drives, another big thing. So making sure that map drives are just used by users that need them, folder permissions, making sure that PCs that have infected that are infected don't any longer have access to those drives. And I think that privilege is a really important sort of hygiene piece as well. So there's a number of tools out there that will help you to understand this across your enterprise and to take a look at, what are the privilege rights, what are the access rights across all your shares. And a lot of times for clients, when we run some of those audits, they're surprised at who has access to what too. So it's another big thing that really needs to be looked at. And it's again, the most common way that once you're infected, that things spread across your network. Knowing who is using the PC. So back again to the idea of understanding who has what rights where, making sure that automatic logouts are set by GPO, across the board so that systems aren't left logged on. And those simple things, again, you're seeing the pattern here. There's not a lot of technology, but there's a lot of basic hygiene items that need to be followed. Filtering out executables and emails. I know that a lot of you probably do that. I've continually run into customers who aren't doing that today. It's a simple thing. It's very common for payloads to be masquerading inside things like resumes that get attached to emails. Somebody saying that you have a ticket, here's a copy of your traffic violation. We run into these all the time, that people are duped into opening these attachments. And then a lot of times they get put inside of a zip file, so they get compressed, and then making sure that whatever you're using has the ability to scan within those zip files is super beneficial as well. RDP is another big one. It's really a surprise to us how many people have not disabled RDP across the enterprise on systems that don't need to have RDP enabled. So the surprise ransomware, which literally started coming out a couple of months ago, it used team viewer sessions to contaminate PCs, and it really hit a lot of people. They had RDP turned on, they didn't even realize it. Again, just a GPO to make sure that that's disabled across the board if you're not using it and if you don't need it for a business reason. Disabling processes that would launch from areas like app data and local app data directories. So there's an easy way to do that with a local group policy, where you can define an app restriction and it'll prevent programs from being executed in those directories. So a lot of times, malware will copy itself into those directories, and that's something that's, again, with a GPO, real easy for you to disable. And then worst case, be ready. So as much as I find it distasteful to even think about paying in a ransomware situation, if you have data, if that data is critical and you do end up getting attacked and that data does end up getting encrypted, having that discussion ahead of time with management about what would we do? Do we have access to Bitcoin? Is this the process that we would follow? We've had customers that needed and wanted to get their data back, and literally the internal process of just figuring out how to go ahead and pay this because it's one machine, it's a critical machine, we've contained it across the rest of the enterprise, but we need that data, took them days and days, where they literally lost a lot of time and a lot of productivity, and in some cases it was very expensive for them not be able to get access to that. So again, on the tools subject, some of the tools around whitelisting and application control, these are really big, important tools when it comes to protecting yourself against ransomware. Whitelisting is great. It only allows the software that you know to run. And I think that, a lot of customers don't realize that it's not just a program list out there. You can do this with a digital signature of the program being loaded. So knowing that program hasn't been corrupted or adapted in any way. And also, things can be whitelisted based on the location of where the executable resides. So think about what I said before. If you're able to use a GPO, restrict new apps from being executed in a particular folder, and then use whitelisting to basically say that those are the only apps that can be, anything that I put in that folder are the only things that can be executed. It's extremely valuable for that. And then dynamic whitelisting as well. I mean, that's always been a challenge, right, keeping that updated. So the idea that you can do these whitelists based on things like location, based on things like whether the file has a signed cert and you've got it from a known good source, whether it's using a known installer, an installer that is one of the common installers that's supported, or even that a trusted user within your environment who has the rights is actually the one doing that install. So whitelisting is a lot more than just a list of names that can run. It's got a lot of different dynamic capabilities around it. And then from an application control perspective, going beyond whitelisting, having the ability to basically have multiple memory protection techniques against attacks. So in a way, being able to stop some of those zero-day attacks that you see typically only get stopped with sandboxing solutions. These will get stopped on the endpoint quite often if you've got application control enabled. And then also, a lot of the techniques that attackers are using, it's very common for them to use buffer overflow protection. And while Windows has gotten a lot better at that in the last few years, there are still ways that people have found to get around things. So two sort of common side, direct code execution, where they are able to get a buffer overflow and then they can literally directly execute code. And then since about 2007, 2006 or so, Windows has got a lot better about allowing that to be done. But then the real clever hackers can still find an application, execute a buffer overflow, and then they'll leverage the standard built-in Windows library code that's already there to actually go and run their attacks. And that's called, return-oriented programming. So they'll, rather than inject their own code, they've found clever ways to use the code that already exists to go ahead and attack your system. So while Microsoft is preventing direct code execution, they're not preventing their own code from being executed in a nefarious way. So that's why application control on top of all your typical controls, especially the memory protection functions, can really be valuable. Then, to step above that a little bit and to look more strategically at things, we were very involved for many, many years at DynTek in product implementations, whether it was an IPS product, an application control product. And a lot of times one of the things we struggled with was that these were often being deployed as point solutions to solve a problem that had happened or to solve a problem that the customer was anticipating. But they often weren't thought of in terms of all of the business risk and what are we trying to prevent from happening to our business, not necessarily to our technology. And so in 2014, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, came out with a framework called the Cybersecurity Framework. And it was built off of a lot of work that you guys are probably familiar with, things like the SANS Top 20 and COBIT and ISO 27000X. So all of these sort of pieces fed into NIST and provided guidance. But what we liked about NIST was that it, for the first time, it really created a comprehensive security framework where you could think in terms of the controls in your business and the ones that you needed to deploy. And what we did was we mapped that NIST set of guidance to a set of technical security controls. If you can't read these, you'll see the slide. I think they're legible on yours because yours is probably a little bigger than mine. But we broke it down into 7 categories. And the goal with this set of technical security controls, it's a controls matrix, was for us to be able to help our customers explain to management where the technology that they were purchasing was being applied to from more of a business context. So if you look across the top row and you look at things like network protection, email, web, incident response, these were things that we felt our clients could very easily explain to business executives outside of IT. They probably already understand 3 or 4 of them, and explaining the other 3 or 4 is a pretty simple process, and it gives everybody a common sort of context to talk about when you start buying technical controls products and start implementing them. Down the rows were the technical areas that IT infrastructure people and IT networking and IT server and endpoint people were very comfortable with. as opposed to governance and risk and all the things that security professionals tend to be comfortable with. So we wanted to create this matrix as a good way to bridge the security sort of mindset, which is around risk, governance, compliance, to the technical mindset, which is around servers, infrastructure, endpoints, networks. And this was a good tool to do it. And so one of the things that you'll see is that when we walk in and we work with this, we'll talk to a client and we'll inventory what they have, and then we'll come up with a picture that looks sort of like this, which we call a current state view. And it allows them to take a look at what they have from a technical perspective. And of course, all these controls are mapped back to NIST and mapped back to a set of security controls. So the security team understands that they're able to now communicate on a technical basis what it is that they're looking to accomplish. This has been really handy. If you take a look at it, this will definitely be valuable when it comes to ransomware, because it's going to talk about controls like backup. It's going to talk about controls like application control and whitelisting, and they're all going to be covered within this set of controls. And it gives a really nice common framework for you to talk to people across different areas of IT about, as well as talk to business executives about. Finally, this is a full-blown roadmap, but the other nice thing about this way of looking at things is that we're able to create a roadmap, which could be, if you look on this one, it talks about phases. But the idea out of this is to come up with a strategy and a plan over 1 to 5 years to optimize and to mature all these controls around these technologies. So it's a great tool to talk to both sides of the fence about, IT, non-IT, and it's also a good roadmap for you to create a strategy for which controls you need to deploy and when. So, to summarize and to wrap up, with our controls section, we've created a pretty simple model for documenting and planning. I think when you do things this way, you're able to capture the threat of ransomware, as well as a lot of other threats that are tangential to ransomware. So, this quarter and this year, it seems to be a lot about ransomware. Last year we were dealing with other types of malware, and so it's just really the financial aspect of ransomware that has really started to hit home and get into the news lately. But we had a lot of DDoS going on 6 months ago, where everybody was getting DDoS, and by following a control strategy, you're sort of addressing all of those areas in a full holistic basis versus going after point solutions and trying to solve point problems. So we really do appreciate your time today, and I'm going to turn it back to Kim, and if there's any questions, we'd love to hear them.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to open it up for a Q&A session. To ask a question, please click on the messages button at the bottom of your screen, type your question into the gray text box, and click send message. And we do have a few questions here. The first question, can ransomware connect to a network that is self-contained, that is, operates as a standalone network and has no internet connections?
I think, Christian, either of us could take that. It's up to you.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead if you want.
Well, I think maybe we could both, feed into this. I would give you a quick couple points. It depends on the other access that you have. So if you're allowing USBs, if you're allowing other types of traversals into those devices and into that network, then yes, ransomware can be injected. So it really depends how separated your network is, and whether you allow any kind of external access of any type. And I don't know, Christian, you want to add to that?
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think, honestly, the myth self-contained network, I think, especially in healthcare, being there last week in a couple of hospitals, most of these self-contained networks also have like some shares. So, for example, a CT scanner writes his files to a certain directory, and the whole medical staff and from the ER has access to that share. So at some point, like you said, if something happens, the self-contained is no longer self-contained anymore.
Okay, we have another question. Won't backup also have copies of the ransomware on the storage device?
If you backed up after the attack was there, the answer is always yes. Sometimes, even if you backed up before you thought the attack was there, the answer is still yes. This is why we don't just have a daily backup. We have a weekly and a monthly, and hopefully we're not going back farther than that. I would point out another really important thing to consider as you think of all the controls that I put up there is something called forensics. So having forensics on your machines, meaning that you're collecting information about what's happening on a second-by-second basis, gives you the ability to actually find out when the ransomware was injected and to go to a backup prior to that time. Kristen, I don't know if you have anything.
I think that's right.
Okay, great. We do have another question. Can data be encrypted so that ransomware cannot then attack and try to re-encrypt your data?
I don't think so, to be honest. Even if you encrypt like a disk or something, of course your files need to be recognized by your Office program. So, for example, if you have PowerPoint files, even though the disk is encrypted, the disk might be encrypted, but your PowerPoint files still need to be recognized. But so the ransomware then will go after the file extensions and still will encrypt the files. So file encryption on itself won't protect against ransomware.
Great. And one final question, then we'll wrap up. If a person wants to get involved in writing procedures to fight ransomware, what are some of the skills one should possess?
I think it's a combination of the points that Steve and I made today. Is like, if you want to look at procedures for fighting against ransomware, I would say understand the threat. Like, how is it possible that ransomware will get into my company? So, for example, you can take some countermeasures on your email servers. If you look at some of the ransomware families, they really spread through phishing. So they have some particular topics about resumes, and you can easily write some rules in your email server already to stop those threats as well. I think another thing that Steve absolutely mentioned, I fully agree, is it really surprises me that people are still not updating their systems. I think a lot of ransomware used by exploit kits can be stopped, and those exploit kits have vulnerabilities back to 2012 or whatever, and that's 4 years. So if you're not patching your systems for 4 years, there's a bigger problem. So I think really understand the threat, how it starts spreading, and how it could infect your systems. I think that will definitely help you with writing some procedures for this.
Okay, great. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for all your questions. I'd like to thank our presenters, Christiaan and Steve. This concludes today's broadcast. You may now disconnect.